Hello everyone. If you're watching this video, then hopefully you have seen the other two spy guides, the new spy guide and the intermediate spy guide. So far, I have talked about essential skills you should learn and practice to avoid being caught by the enemy team, and how to effectively stalk important targets to take them down. In today's guide, I wanted to discuss some advanced things you would need to know if you encounter cohesive teams. Sometimes skilled teams will be constantly calling out your location, listening for you, and sticking together so that you cannot kill any of them. In these situations, you will need to be on top of your game to be able to get important picks and live. I will also be discussing trick stabs in this video, although that will not be the main focus, and a full trick stab video will be made in the future. So let's get into it. I should preface this by talking about my loadout, which is the L'étranger, Invis Watch, and the Kunai. So this video will assume you're using some sort of Invis Watch. The first thing that you should know to advance a spy is when an enemy team is watching for you. While you are cloaked, do you notice enemies constantly turning around or spy checking teammates? Do pyros patrol around their Engis and medics? Have you been annoying the team enough for them to start trying to catch you? These are all important things to consider when attempting to kill an important member of their team. As we discussed in earlier videos, the important enemies to pick are medics, Engis, and snipers. And most good teams know this and will do their best to protect those teammates. The best way to counter this is by being patient. Even the very best teams will eventually slip up and make a mistake, and that is when you strike. For example, if a pyro is constantly spraying fire and spy checking teammates, a good thing to do is to get somewhere out of his range or above him and wait until he moves on or turns around. If your goal is to survive after a stab, then don't get cocky. The spy is the squishiest class in TF2, which means that if you go for a stab prematurely and miss, then you will most likely die and achieve nothing, so there's no reason to get ahead of yourself. Just wait until those spy checking players move on and then try to get your target. Another thing you can do to avoid getting caught by good teams is to choose another target. While it's true that Engis, medics, and snipers are essential to kill, it is not always possible to get them when you want. There is nothing wrong with simply waiting for the team to move up and picking a different target. Power classes are a good pick when you can't get anything else, and usually picking power classes such as heavies, soldiers, and demos will allow your team to push up much easier. When your team pushes up, it allows you to take advantage of the distraction and get those targets you really want. One thing I find with good teams, and especially good Engis, is that they will always be watching their buildings, and specifically their teleporters and sentries. When Engis and their teammates are always watching their teleporters, the best thing to do is to go to their spawn to get them down. Despite all the other classes or buildings you can pick, you absolutely need to take their tellies down, as it is essential to stop the enemy team from grouping up and getting to the front line. Although it may waste a few seconds to get to the enemy spawn, it's worth it to take those buildings down. The way to do this is to pay attention to the enemy respawns. Typically the entire enemy team will not be alive or dead, all at the same time, so take note of which enemies are alive. If an enemy engineer has just died, you know it's safe to try and sap the tellies if no one else is around, but say an Engi has died 10 seconds ago. You should hide at their spawn and wait for the Engi to spawn and take his telly. This applies to all the enemy team and not just the Engis, however. Use common sense when deciding when to decloak at enemy spawns. You don't want to run into a pyro or heavy. A few people seem to appreciate my mentioning of verticality in my last video. All this means is that as a spy, it is often advantageous to get above the enemy team. Most players don't check above them when they spy check, meaning that a lot of the time if you stay above enemies you are out of range. This can also help you to pick enemies. Some people consider jumping down on people as a form of trick stab, however I think it's just something that every decent spy should be doing. When you are above your enemies, you can more clearly understand where everyone is on the map. It gives you an eagle-eye view to observe the game. From here it's all about timing. When above players, pick out an enemy who is alone, and then determine which direction they are walking. Then you jump down so that you are right behind them and stab. Most players that have a few hundred hours on Spy are already aware of drop stabs, but don't realize how useful they actually are. I would say as a general rule, if it is possible to be above the enemy team, then you should be there. It makes you safer and makes stabs much easier. Another thing that falls under the category of verticality is jump stabs. These are simply when you are able to jump over the enemy's head and get a stab on their back. You can perform these stabs on essentially any raised surface, meaning that even if you have a small height advantage, you can jump over most players' heads, allowing you a chance at a backstab. Most experienced players will see this coming, however, so it is best to do this around corners or on newer players. This chapter is short, but I wanted to expand on something I talked about before, and that is profiling players. Typically in TF2, more experienced players will have shinier hats and expensive cosmetics. I have found that most of the time these players are more prone to checking their surroundings and paying attention to sound cues. They often tend to be more experienced with a specific weapon they are using, so taking down these players is a gamble. Often they will be the players carrying teams though, which means they are a prime target for you. You deal with these players the same way as experienced teams and be patient. Eventually they will slip up and be distracted by your team, and that's the time to strike. On the other hand, you will notice a lot of players with no cosmetics and stock loadouts. Most of the time these are newer players, as you can probably tell. These players are often what would be considered free kills, and most of the time they will be trying to figure out what they are supposed to be doing. Some people feel bad for killing them or will leave them alone, but remember, killing them is how they improve. I should mention as a side note that some players will pretend to be newer to trick players into thinking they are easy kills, so don't always assume a player doesn't know what they are doing. Of course, the three main rules for Spy, as mentioned in the new Spy guide, is to not be seen, heard, or caught. And what do you do when you are caught? Say you just stabbed an enemy, and a soldier sees you and starts shooting rockets. You should immediately cloak and start running away, but as soon as you are fully cloaked, run the opposite direction. Most players will assume that whichever direction you are running while cloaking is the direction you will continue running, so switch it up. This applies to if you bump into someone while cloaked too. Treat bumping into an enemy as a life or death situation, because many times it is. Anytime your cloak becomes visible, even for a short amount of time, switch your direction. There may be enemies you don't see who did see you, so it's always better to be safe than sorry. Once you have successfully gotten clear of any immediate threats, you can check your surroundings and make sure no one is still searching for you. Even if you are surrounded by enemies and there seems to be no way of escape, don't give up. If you are feeling lucky, then another thing you can try when getting caught is trick stabs. Trick stabs will often reward you by helping you escape, especially with the kunai. But invisibility is a very strong tool and gives you a real possibility of getting away if you confuse your enemies correctly, so don't take it for granted. One of the best tactics you can deploy in any game is redirection. Sun Tzu said all warfare is based on deception, so use it as much as you can.
Sun Tzu said that!
Let's say the entire enemy team is aggressively looking for you, giving you no opportunity to get near them. One useful thing you can do is decloak far enough away so that when they see you they will give chase, but not so close that you are caught. Then run away and cloak. You have just successfully used redirection. Now there is one or more less players guarding their team while you are closing in on their medic. Medic assisted his own death. Redirection can also work on a smaller scale as well with things such as trick stabs. In simple terms, trick stabs work by making your enemy face a certain way while you go the opposite and stab them. Most people explain trick stabs in terms of moving left and right, such as strafing. However, something that a lot of players don't expect is for you to move closer to them when you are found out. By pretending to run away and then suddenly moving towards players, they will often keep moving forward, which will often mean they run past you, giving you an opportunity for a stab. This is a very risky thing to do, as is all backstabs, but could save your life if pulled off. Another example of redirection is dealing with Engis. When you sap an engineer's building, you will often start running to it to get the sapper off. You can use this to your advantage. Say you want an Engi sentry down, but you won't leave it alone. Sap his teleporter and cloak so that the Engi is forced to go to it. Then walk towards his sentry and decloak. This should give you enough time to sap his sentry and shoot it down. You could also use this to stab Engis. When they walk towards the building you sapped, decloak behind or above them and stab them when they get to their sapped building. Players don't often expect you to decloak soon after you cloak, so they may not realize you are right behind them. Cap that cart, guys, get on there. Today we talked about understanding enemy awareness, verticality, player profiling, and what to do when caught, and redirection. With these tools you learned, you will be able to pick off even the best players if you are patient, and hopefully you will be at the top of the leaderboards. Remember the steps for killing good targets. First check if they are looking out for spies and determine what equipment they are carrying. Then get above them and use a drop stab to kill them. If you are seen, then you cloak and redirect the enemy team to where you want them to think you are, and then go the opposite way. That's all there is to it. Using these steps, you should be able to get in and get out without dying. I hope you enjoyed this guide for Spy, and I really hope you learned something useful. There's going to be at least one more of these guides for you guys in the future, so don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more. Good luck and have fun.